I'm Wyatt Prunty, and I'm part of the warm-up act for Francine Cruz. I hope dinner was all right. I hope the rooms are all right. Our job here over the next 2 weeks is twofold: to benefit from the responses we are given to our own writing, and to be careful readers of the writing others put forward in the workshops. This is a poem. This is an adult glass of water. Thanks for being here. Welcome to Sewanee. It's great to see all of you here. This is our 25th year. And it's new every year because there are new people here, and there is a lot of talent. I can tell you that we should start with Tennessee Williams. He is the gift that keeps on giving, as locals say around here. And he makes a great deal of what we do, better than we would do otherwise, possible. The administration has wisely put aside half of what Tennessee has provided from year to year, and we have an endowment that's growing. It means that Sewanee will be able to do what it's doing now and more as the years go by. The copyright will go out someday, but the Sewanee Writers Conference will still be here. So think about your children. I guess I should explain the three glasses. I think I know the explanation. The first year of the conference, I was giving my reading and fully sincere, doing my best. And after 3 or 4 poems, was thirsty, and I reached over, picked up a glass that looked just like any one of these three. And it had straight vodka in it. And I'm a gulper, not a sipper. I'll get to that later. Okay, the joke this year was there was no joke. The poem I'd like to read now is entitled The Ferris Wheel. The rounding steeps and jostles were one thing, and he held tight with so much circling. The pancaked earth came magnifying up, then shrank as, climbing backward to the top, he looked ahead for something in the fields to stabilize the wheel.
Delighted to be here. Thank you, Wyatt and Barbara.
Thank you, Wyatt.
I just love being here. It's like being at a family reunion with attractive, smart people.
Thank you, Wyatt. Thank you so much to Wyatt and to Barbara.
Thank you, Wyatt. It's an honor to be here.
Thank you, Wyatt, and I'm not telling you any more stories about my past.
Sometimes it stopped. The chairs rocked back and forth as couples holding hands got off and others climbed into the empty chairs. Then they were turning, singles, pairs, rising, falling through everything they saw, whatever thing they saw. Below, the crowd, a holiday of shirts, straw hats, balloons, and brightly colored skirts. So beautiful, he thought. Looking down now while the stubborn wheel ground on, as to allow some stark monotony within for those festooned along the rim.
Thanking the usual suspects, Wyatt and Barbara.
Thank you, Wyatt.
Thank you, Wyatt.
Thank you so much, Wyatt.
Thanks for having me back, Wyatt.
Thank you, Wyatt.
Thank you, Wyatt, so much.
A great thank you to Wyatt and Barbara.
A very special thanks to Wyatt Prunty, without whom none of these poems would have even been written.
The engine, axles, spokes, and gears were rigged so at the top the chairs danced tipsy jigs, a teetering both balanced and extreme. Oh no, the couples cried, laughing. Stop, they screamed. Over the rounding down they rode along, centrifugal and holding on.
Thank you. Thanks, Wyatt.
Thank you to Wyatt.
I want to thank Barbara and Wyatt, of course, for their incomparable hospitality.
Back in 1992, I came here as a Dakin Fellow, and it was enormously important for me and really did change my poetry life, literally.
I'd like to thank Wyatt for bringing me back for my second year on staff. It is by far my favorite time of year, and just one of the most inspirational and encouraging places I've ever been.
Thank you, Wyatt. I was stunned.
Well, as always, I want to thank Wyatt and Barbara, who have made this such an extraordinary conference.
And he held too, thinking maybe happiness was simply going on, kept up unless the wheel slowed or stopped for good. Otherwise, there were the voices, expectant of surprise. Funny to hear, he thought, their cries, always late, each time the wheel would hesitate. Since the genius of the wheel was accident, the always almost that hadn't, a minor agony rehearsed as fun, while the lights came up and dark replaced the sun, seeming to complete their going round all day, paying to be turned that way.
Wyatt, who's taught me limitless lessons in generosity and some stuff about literature too.
I want to thank Wyatt for the invitation, or as it is otherwise known, the call, to participate in a conference of first name kindness.
There are so many people in my life whom I love deeply, whom I did not know before I started coming to Sewanee. And every summer I look forward to seeing them if I get the call, as we call it.
You know, the other day, I was sitting at breakfast, and Lillian Manning was sitting there, and she all of a sudden says, she opens up her arms and she says, "This is my family." So, I sort of feel like that. This is my family.
Later, standing off, he felt the wheel's mild dread going as though it lapped the miles ahead and rolled them up into the cloudless black, while those who rode accelerated back and up into the night's steep 0G that proved them free.
Always a pleasure to read here for this audience, and I want to thank Wyatt for bringing me back yet again.
The sound of art in this room has, for 25 years, has been echoing in my head.
I don't have the words to say how much I enjoy being here and how grateful I am to be here. So I'm just going to say it again. Thank you, Wyatt. Thank you, Wyatt.
I was cleaning out one of the coffee pots, and he walked through the room, and I asked him how he was doing. And he smiled and said, "I may not be as young as you, but I'm just as happy." That was typical Wyatt. It was effortlessly poetic, witty, and charming. And I figured that if I'd made something as miraculous as this, I'd be pretty happy too.
That's for him. I'm sitting here thinking 3 minutes for me. One second. Yeah. Wyatt, thank y'all. We know we can't thank Wyatt enough for all that he's done for us over the years, but that doesn't mean that we can't try. We've compiled this book here from thank you letters and notes from many, many writers, and thank you so much. Shelby's done a wonderful job putting this together. also the movie as well. And there's a box here to collect more. Thank you for everything done. Wyatt Prunty.
They know me so much better than I know myself. Good grief. Ah. Oh, dear. Okay. This won't go on too long. I think that sort of wore the subject of me out. I will tell you that Lillian made me a member of the Paw Patrol, and everyone in the room has something to look forward to, therefore. Just get to know Lillian. That's Morris and Amanda's daughter, the blonde girl about 3 feet tall, 2.5 feet tall. I'm just going to read around here. I thanked our former Vice Chancellor last week. I would like to thank John McCardle and his wife Bonnie, who gave us that really nice reception last week. He's the I guess for 9 years, our Vice Chancellor. That's quite a job. In my close observation, because this is a little school, the Vice Chancellors we've had have really given their lives over to this place, which means they've given their lives over even to us here for 12 days in ways that are invisible but are very much appreciated. There are a couple of hangabouts who are attorneys who don't act much like attorneys when they're here. George Bishop and Steve Sanford. Steve is from the upper Midwest and reminds me sometimes when he tells stories of Mark Twain's character who starts a story and just keeps digressing and dozing and digressing. Steve's stories are wonderful, but you've got to have a lot of endurance to stay with him. George carries a little short, some object that'll poke pins and balloons. He operates the opposite way. They make a great team. They're very supportive of this program, and sometimes in ways that you'll never see, but are quite good. I thank them for always being here. Who else? I would say that Megan is leaving, and we wish her the very best. She will be in Athens, Georgia next week, teaching at Athens Academy. She has brought a kind of grace to the Writers Conference that Cherie Peters was so famous for bringing, and Khaki Wilkinson did too. Kevin Wilson, a long list of people. Now we have Leah and Gwen who are stepping in. Gwen will be in the office, and you know what Leah is doing. I'll come back to Leah a little bit later. Adam Latham looks like he's just in from rafting. I think his specialties are catfish and barbecue, and then fiction third. He does not wear out. He can work longer than anybody I know, and he works for this conference that way. So I'm grateful to all of those people. And I'm grateful to everybody in this room. As many of you have been back many times, there are others who are not here. There are those who will come in the future. But this is a collective effort. You bring talent, you bring your goodwill. It doesn't work if you people don't show up, and it doesn't work if you don't show up with the things I just mentioned, the goodwill and the talent. So thank you for that. What else? That would be a start. Okay, let's see. Now I have to find a couple of poems. I'm going to just read. I had something I could have worked into this, but I think I'm going to read things that have been around because, to tell you the truth, they came about over the course of this conference in one way or another. And the first one I want to read was written right after we visited here for a semester and went back to Virginia. And our daughter, we'd given her a bicycle, but she'd not learned to ride it. This is if you hear a poem of mine on public radio, you'll almost always hear this. So I'm stuck on this poem apparently, but it's for a good reason. It's for our daughter Heather. It's called Learning the Bicycle, and I'll say after I read it, it has a little application, I think, to what we do here. The older children pedal past, stable as little gyros, spinning hard to supper, bath, and bed, until at last we also quit, silent and tired beside the darkening yard where trees now shadow up instead of down. The predictable links can only tease her as head lowered. She walks her bike alone somewhere between her wanting to ride and her certainty she will always fall. Tomorrow, though I will run behind, arms out to catch her, she'll tilt, then balance wide of my reach, till distance makes her small, smaller, beyond the place I stop and know that to teach her I had to follow, and when she learned, I had to let her go. She was here last week, but she's back in New York now, where she is a teacher and has 2 small children. And another one taught at another place for a year, and that was Washington and Lee, where the students, the undergraduates, were as raucous as I think I remember some of the students at this college, like Richard Tillinghast back there and others from 30 or more years ago, or some others I could mention, Bill, CU. This is A Winter's Tale, and my father died, and then right after that we had this little boy on the way, and a fellow named George Ray who taught at W&L, he and I ran these long, took these long routes up and down the Maury River out in Lexington, and we came in one day, and after, I don't know, 6 miles or something, and he commented on the loss of my father and the arrival of our son, that my life was like the Winter's Tale. So driving back home that night on Interstate 85, I wrote this one, and every now and then they come out just bloop. Ian had to, both kids arrived by cesarean, and the second time I got to be there, and I have said this before, forgive me, Ian, and Stephanie, Ian's wife, she is here, and our granddaughter is here too. She just hasn't quite emerged yet to shake our hands. She'll be here in September. So Florence, forgive me, you're already hearing this, and you'll probably hear it again. But when Ian was born, we didn't know whether we were getting a boy or girl. We didn't ask. We didn't want to know. And they pull this little guy out. Barbara's all up for it and everything. She didn't see as much of what they were doing as I did. We were up. They pull this little guy out, and he comes out upside down with his fist ball and his eyes closed. And you can tell when they're born what the gender is, and it was a guy. And he opened his eyes and looked over the table at me and the other surgeon, screamed, and pissed a huge arc over the table all over me. Whereupon I said, "That's my boy." Silent and small in your wet sleep, you grew to the traveler's tale we made of you so we could keep you safe in our vague pastoral. And silent when the doctors tugged heels up your body free of its deep habitat, shoulders shrugged against the cold air's continent we made you take for breathing. Ian, your birth was my close land turned green, the stone rolled back for leaving, my father dead, and you returned. So there's that. Now, I was looking through poems, and someone asked me today, or no, earlier this week, I guess, about one in particular, and I made a note of it in my back of my mind. And I thought this would be a real good one to read early on as a mild corrective, an inadequate corrective, but step in the right direction anyway for what you've just been put through up here and so forth. And this is entitled Bad Dog. It's not entirely a corrective, but he was a bad dog and he did not care. When nature called, he stood and lifted there. He chewed socks, rugs, and shoes, the rungs of chairs, Put on a leash, he locked his legs, would not budge. Asleep, he barked and chased what was not there. Awake, he barked and chased what was not there. When danger knocked, he shrugged. I see him still that way, facing the door, floppy and kind, wet nose against the glass, or scratching over ears where going bald, then sniffing round to find just where he lifted earlier, the which he did just once more when at last nature called and he followed. I got a hate letter from Long Island when this book first came out from a dog lover. And he would not forgive me. I let the dog die. But I'm sure enough of that. Let's see what else. This is something I try to read often for a couple of reasons. This is another kid poem. This is another little guy. It's from the 50s. It's entitled Making Frankenstein. It's when the movie The Curse of Frankenstein came out. And it's family. All of these poems, I think, today, just about all of them either have to do with family or pets. People keep talking about us being a family, so I thought I'd just ride that train. Okay. He could not know, although he wheedled and cajoled, begged and promised, but they would not know, they would not take him to see The Curse of Frankenstein. Then his uncle called and offered, and they caved. So next it was the matinee, then home, at nothing said, until he sat through dinner like a little diplomat, and after that excused himself and took his plate and headed up to bed. Still nothing said. No, but midnight he woke screaming. Morning, his father cleared the plates, then turned. That's that, he summarized, too anatomical. What's anatomical? The boy asked back. This was summer 1957. Monarchs foraged flowers, working colors with their yes now, no now light arrhythmias. By afternoon, leaves shimmered in the heat, and in the evening, intermittent waves of fireflies telegraphed their kind, while in the little deeps of darkened houses, window units swallowed oceans of air, until the boy, deep in his house, slept hard enough that when he woke he couldn't close his hands. But what was anatomical? He asked again. His father climbed a ladder to the attic where he bumped around, then climbed back down carrying an old Fox Gray's Anatomy, packed full with illustrations. What, seeing these, the boy felt certain were the pictures of mixed meats. That night the windows purred and nothing budged till breakfast brought another book, this time on pathology, which meant more pictures plus diseases where the worst were best and came from intimate contact. But what was intimate, he later pestered, till his father downed his drink and said, that's how you made your way into this world. Mother rose and left the room. The boy sat silent. He sat there calmer than the noggin of a cat until he stretched and, yawning, mentioned that he might just go on up and get to bed. But secretly, he understood. He knew for good and always that, in fact, his father wasn't a serious man. So he was on his own and had to make sense out of things himself, even if some sense went wrong, like Frankenstein's, who wasn't a serious man either, and that was really that, even if it meant you'd think you'd sink one day without so much as SOS. Some nights that summer, sleepless, eyes pinned wide, He'd slip outdoors to watch his parents on the porch, their cigarettes, their quiet talk, and then for nothing he could tell, their laughter as his father fixed another round of drinks, and after that more laughter, like cicadas. The boy watched this, as now he sometimes drives the 5 miles out of way to see that house again, and never you mind his knowing better. Sometimes just his doing this sets off imaginings that he is standing in the kitchen saying, "Oh, my dear animal family, how I loved you, how richly we purred." And sometimes, too, it sweeps back over him, his thinking that his father wasn't a serious man. Those times, slowing the car, he says to himself, "Well, then you're not a serious man either." I mentioned a lot of people we owe things to. I'll mention 2 more, and one of them is in the back, on the back row. And I don't think I mentioned her, but I had her down here for later, but I'll just go ahead now. Marjorie Fellner helped me the first year. Her husband was an artist. They moved back to the Northwest. But the one who was in the docket really for helping me and had gone with her husband, Jim, on a sabbatical was Cherie Peters. How many of you were here when Cherie was? Okay. Cherie, where are you? Okay. Cherie was with me all those years, many, many years, and in the beginning there was just the 2 of us, and often she would be over there Saturdays, Sundays. That's not to say some right now are not over on Saturdays and Sundays, but Cherie was over there an awful lot, and I think we established what we wanted to be about through what is her grace too. Her Presbyterian grace, which is a pretty staunch version, I might mention, and kept me straight. Okay. Let's see what else for the. This is a poem that I was going to read last, but I think I'll go ahead and read it now. It's entitled Yes. There's a family here, the Ramseurs. Ruth Ramseur was a principal at the school for a long time. She just died a couple of weeks ago. Her husband was a faculty member. He's still going to church and around town. They have a granddaughter named Carolyn Ramseur, and when Carolyn was a very small girl, she said the following to her mother. You know, and I should jump ahead and just say this. She now is an opera singer, okay. But 3, you know, when I'm 16, I'm going to ride a motorcycle, swim in the deep end, and have jiggly breasts. It's entitled Yes. Always to see the world made whole, though that is just the thing you will not be. The parent who looks back suddenly old, or pet that walks the dark edge of the drive just out of sight and refusing when called. And always to see the world made new, a driver balancing, arms out, eyes fixed over the cold pool's undivided blue, as skywide high he now is rising down, feet up, head tucked, hands arrow-heading to the still then brightly shattered surface where he either enters or just disappears. It is always one or the other. Heroes who go or just go away through the sea, the jungle, some zeroed commonplace we dream for them with making the world whole. As yes, the tall grass hatch of killdeer live because their parents play the vaudeville role of flutter, run, look back, limp, drag, and wait. Parents and pets and years, all of it rolled into a longing neither sad nor quite wise to the lone's eventual terms. As yes, the chemo works, killing cells mad and sane alike, as yes, memory lives, collected, shelved, and waiting to unfold. When cross town there's a siren going somewhere. Hear all that urgent anonymity building and passing at once to a fire, a wreck, a false alarm or practical joke, or heart attack suddenly extravagant for air. Hear each of these, both real and premature, for Carolyn Ramseur, who, all of three, names the world and its manifold future, wanting to be what she sees as its glory, the bike, the boobs, the deep end's forfeiture, because there's something more that goes unsaid, the dim flare of a candle guttering a wall, whose liver-spotted water stains have bled years past a rafter's narrow crack of light. Say yes to the candle stain's watery light. That's a poem that Leah may not remember this, but when she was first here, she asked me if I would read it, and I was looking through what should I read, and I thought Leah Stewart just got through saying yes, and this at least has a title that applies to her. So thank you, Leah, for saying yes, and thank you, Gwen, also. That's that. This is a little tougher-minded. How many of you wake up in the night and write things down and then find you can keep them? I know Mary Jo does. How many of you have insomnia? How many of you will tell the truth? Well, this is one of those for me. It's called An Early Guide to Trapping. It's out of another century somehow. Whether your industry be pelts for fashion, the trials of sport, riddance of pest, or finding food, the first rule is your unobtrusiveness. The second, except for pestilence, is that you cause small injury, as any hurt will render animals less valuable. Tend your traps. A fouled device is wasted ingenuity, and escape the spent engine of diligence. And know that those once caught by limbs may gnaw themselves free, walking after on three legs and ever wary of your instrument. Any slight in practice lessens chance of prize. Prompt attendance answers this. The ideal of one trap is no ideal, as best results will always come in numbers, allowing you to find in series what no single bait will ever fetch. Remember, range is hunger and supply, so set your lines accordingly, crossing all customary paths. Movement is your friend. Since nocturnals make your fortune while you sleep, let sleep be model and reminder that the landscape also rests and will be crossed, and its encounters made your benefit. As to your traps, clean them of incident. Even you in your particular may foul, and understand that quiet suits you best, as the set jaws, nets, doors, boxes, and pits of your engines readily display. Waiting is the final instrument. Learn that and make it your advantage. Look for wet season when populations grow, and meeting the face of imposed idleness, count the future as long gain. Memorize the graduals that water takes, as thirst can be a steady ally and underbrush the sight of much traffic. Except when facing certain deprivation, see that you pull your traps by spring. The captured kit or fawn is small reward compared to later enterprise. Be systematic in your work and avoid distraction over painful signs. The enlarged stare, extended legs, set mouth, as suffering will touch all animals, however long or cannily one skirts that fire. As you would teach your children caution, what to expect, where not to step, how sorrow follows error, How grief's a backward pain without relief. Perfect yourself in every watchfulness. Food comes to the focused eye, and hunger focuses, while living in hours only means hours. And to those traps filled and waiting you, be prompt to clear, rebate and set, and never let the signatures of grief, whether met firsthand or written by escape, dissuade you from refinement of purpose, as you will increase by every good form of patience. And this is another one that is, this is the only two that aren't smilers, okay? This is another one happened sort of on its own. You remember about 15 years ago when Jim Lear was putting the photographs of the people in Iraq and Afghanistan on TV every night who died? And, you know, we are imperialists. Americans don't think of themselves that way, but look what we do when the price at the gas pump goes up. How we complain. This is called The Returning Dead, and I wrote it all in one sweep. Each night I make a drink and wait for them. They've become the day's concluding news, installments from a world without anthems or children, unfocusing eyes, a question that repeatedly rejects my easy terms. There are ones who believed and acted in the narrow and select ways handed them, while ordinary lives ran on without interruption or bad pictures, as though nothing had changed. Change is the one unanswerable question of these faces. The world can rearrange itself repeatedly, but these remain the same, silent in everything they lack. That's what they've come to in places with names like Afghanistan, Iraq. And this is the way it happens. The words are old: mother, father, home, and will catch surrounding currents in the slow, absurd, descending will of any river etched out of a landscape history refines to myth. The TV blanks between segments, but every static face defines itself, holds stubbornly its private scene, fixed publicly, as we are led back to that little negative whose lack is each of us, staring the staring dead, leaning sometimes like grief itself, then straightening back. I'm not a pacifist, but that would be a step towards that. You know, those wars are expensive. You all know that. Okay, here's another poem about the disasters of Dad. Let's see here. Back in the family mode. This is, I'm just picking the ones that I associate with this conference, except for the two I just read I associate with this conference. This is another Christmas tie this year. And it rolls into the first sentence. Another Christmas tie this year that is green and red and longer than usual and worn by you over another Christmas dinner where you are smiling down the table and taking stock. This really makes me nostalgic. The next line, I'll start over and you'll see why. It has to do with age. That is green and red and longer than usual and worn by you over another Christmas dinner where you are smiling down the table and taking stock. You're 65. You're 65. You've got your health. You've got your job. You like to work. Left and right, your smiling kids are out of school. They've got their health, their jobs, their plans. They say they like to work. They save. And tonight they are laughing with tears in their eyes. Far end, there is your wife laughing. She is beautiful in ways Jane Fonda never figured out. And so much younger, too. Such that the both of you know who, times come, will do the tucking in. And she will live on well because she is, well, she is younger than you, and so kind about the things she cannot change, like you. Not that you're not distinguished in your quiet world where you are far too modest ever to wear that rack of medals you deserve, but live instead as though some gray Olympian who likes to give the second place a second chance. And you are Chamberlain and Russell and Byrd and Roland Kirk, Monk, Brubeck, and the other Byrd and Melville and Hardy enjoying a good laugh on a summer day. You are the hidden redwood in your side yard's undergrowth, bordering a cul-de-sac of grave reflection, where your neighbors never park their cars quite right, and you do not mind that always you must look down a bit to see these things. No, really only a worry about your looking down just now. No, really only worry about your looking down just now, that it might be to find some small spot of something on your brand new tie. Until in order to say grace, hands rising to your lap, you do look down, bowing your head while a grave moment stretches through your family's silence. You look down and see, in fact, there is no spot on your tie, no spot at all, because while sitting down, you let the tie sink into the gravy boat, where it has settled and lost the long, flat bough of holly with red berries it was meant to represent. There it is, stilled and changed above your washed and separate hands, which you now join, saying grace anyway, and meaning it a little more than would have been the case with only a small spot on your tie. Let's go drink.